Next question is begins with you. The question is, how would the town of Waukesha handle an open records request without naming any specifics? How would you handle an open records request? And are there any limits to the financial impact to an open records request?
Well, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but let's tackle the last part of it first. Are there any financial limits to an open records request? And I guess that would be, how much money would you spend on an open records request? There's current legislation in the state legislature right now that would impact how much money a town has to spend, or any community for that matter, has to spend on open records requests. And it's limited, I believe, to the first $50. I think that's the new legislation that's coming out. With regards to how we handle open records requests, if I were chairman, all supervisors would have unrestricted access to unredacted records. That is simply not the case right now. We have supervisors who have made open records requests and had to hire attorneys to try and get that material. They still don't have it. We as a town, you and I, have spent, according to the estimates from Chairwoman Van Scyoc, up to $40,000 for redacting emails that Supervisor German and Supervisor Fisher have both requested and should have had unrestricted, unredacted access to. But yet we've spent up to $40,000 on that for no good reason. It should have been given to them in email form. We shouldn't have killed 50 years of old growth forest in order to print 16,000 pages of paper for them to review. It should have been given to them in electronic format. I think the open records laws speak very clearly, and they say that we as citizens and of course our supervisors have unrestricted access to the records of the town.
Thank you, John. That wasn't the beeper. I don't know if you were done. That was
something else. Yeah.
Angie?
Let's read the question again, because I
The
think
question is how in the town of Waukesha would you handle an open records request without naming specifics? How would you handle that request? And are there any financial limits to an open records request?
I think the first time you said without naming names.
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. Well, I won't be a name dropper on this one. Yes, we've had some open record requests in the town of Waukesha, and many of them have come from you, John, and I think they were faithfully executed and provided to you by the clerk, as we do each and every day. We did have a very unusual request by a supervisor who asked for a very open dialogue of 6 months of my emails, which counted for about 6,000 emails. It was about 50 a day and 16,000 pages. Those documents were never requested of me personally, and that is documented in the Waukesha Freeman. It immediately came to me, but the first time I saw it through an attorney. I believe that was done for effect, and we're still talking about it right before the election, so I think it had probably its effect. Those boxes sat here unredacted for over a month. They were not reviewed by the individual involved. All those redacted documents by his or attorney request on February 5th have now been redacted by the supervisor's request. Those boxes are done, and the supervisor refuses to pick them up. So whatever the urgency was to spend our town taxpayer money has come to no good, because no one has even looked at the documents. The estimate of $40,000 was at a minute apiece. We were able to find ways to have that be shorter for the attorney to review, and so we estimate that the entire cost to the town will be $20,000. Mr. German had initially indicated, and it was reported in the newspaper, that he would pay for any and all costs related to this. He has now reneged on that request, or on that stipulation.
Thank you. John, 1 minute rebuttal.
The bottom line here is, we've got supervisors, 2 of them, both Fisher and German, that have asked for open records. There is absolutely no need for any of this to be redacted. Neither of the supervisors have asked for them to be redacted. As a matter of fact, they have specifically asked for these things not to be redacted. And if we're spending $20,000 on redacting stuff that they should have plain, simple, unrestricted access to, $20,000 is too much. 10 would be too much, 5,000 would be too much. $5 would be too much. It's our tax dollars. There's absolutely no need for any of this nonsense to go on. They should have been given it to, it should have been given it to them in electronic format with no redaction whatsoever, with no restrictions.
Thank you, John. Angie, rebuttal?
They were given the opportunity to do just that. They refused to come in and do so. One of the supervisors involved has already provided information directly to the media that was to be gone through by a redaction process. He has shown complete disregard to the safety of the town of Waukesha. We have HIPAA laws, we have our legal strategy. There are reasons that we protect ourselves. That needs to be done when someone has a demonstrated lack of attention to protecting the town of Waukesha. Certainly there are things we need to do. But on any and all basis, all documents are available, unredacted, to all of our supervisors. But if they wish to take security documents off these premises, they must be redacted, and they must pay the same as a normal citizen.
Thank you. Angie, the next question is posed to you. The question is, the 288 acres of land that's being discussed by the town of Brookfield for the incorporation process, do you feel that the town should remain in the town of Waukesha? And what is your opinion on that issue? Angie?
I feel very strongly that that land needs to be protected and needs to be protected strongly. And the town board has acted on that regard through this entire time. That 288 acres that is in question represents approximately $60 million of assessed value. So we have a great stake in that, not only for the people who live there, who chose to live in our environment, our community, with the elected officials they have at our tax rate, but also simply because they chose to live in the town of Waukesha. If that amount of land goes to Brookfield, it is basically a gift to Brookfield. And no matter what they choose to pay us, which at this point they've offered 10 years of taxes, not the 1.2 million that Mr. Marek has indicated, 10 years of taxes, that's approximately $60,000. That's a pittance if somebody were to consider it, considering we get about $60,000 a year, on that. But we put, our taxpayer money, put $700,000 of infrastructure in that area within the last few years. We improved Arcadian Avenue. We were part of that rebuild. We were required to spend the money there. We also did a joint venture with New Berlin and improved Springdale. There's no reason for us to provide these gifts to the town of Brookfield for their aggression on our town lands. Their wish to be a village has nothing to do with the town of Waukesha or the town of Waukesha people. And it is a horrible situation for them to be putting all of us through that. Us as taxpayers have spent almost $120,000 in order to defend that. But there's a lot of money involved. There's personal property rights involved. Think about if somebody had drawn the line around your homes and suddenly said, we're taking you into the city, or we're taking you into the town of Brookfield. It's inappropriate, and we need to fight it.
Thank you. John?
Well, I have long advocated that we should be focusing on a legislative solution to this. And that, in fact, is exactly what is now happening. I've been talking about that for quite some time. Our two state representatives, Representative Kramer and Representative Craig, are crafting legislation that they have broad support for that would retroactively apply to this situation. And each municipality, each town would have to vote, and each town votes separately. So even if the town of Brookfield has more residents in their area that's going to be incorporated versus the town of Waukesha, if both didn't vote for it, the incorporation cannot take place. The legislative solution and addressing this with the Department of Administration is the route that we should have been taking. We have a seat at the table with the DOA. That costs us absolutely nothing. Instead of talking to those folks, instead of talking to our legislators and finding a legislative solution, what we have done is simply call our attorneys like we do for every other problem. We don't talk to anybody. All we do is call attorneys and run up $400 an hour legal fees.
Thank you, John. Angie, a 1-minute rebuttal?
Wow, well, completely untrue. First of all, are we thanking you for the legislative solution? Because quite frankly, we've been working on that for a year now. So I'm glad you're aware of it, and yes, that is something that we want to do, not to protect us in this situation, but to make sure that no other municipality, no other group of people should be in this situation in the future. If it indeed gets done and can help us during this event, fabulous. But it is certainly not the only thing that we can do, and it's certainly not something that will probably protect us. It is important that we understand that this is an incorporation, it has never been done before, and the fact is we need to protect the people that are involved in this area. And legislatively, DOA, we've been working with them from the beginning, we're completely prepared to have the seat at the table and present, and that's where our Washington specialist comes into play, and we're ready to go whenever that moment happens. We'll be ready when they are.
John, 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, a simple question is, if you've been working with the Department of Administration and you've been working with our state representatives on a legislative solution for over a year, how come this is the first time that it's being brought to anybody's attention? It's not been reported in any newspapers, nobody's talked about it. The first time that I'm aware that you've had a meeting with any of those folks was last week in this very hall.
Angie, 1 minute rebuttal.
Yeah, you don't always advertise everything that you're working on, especially on a legislative front when people are looking at different options. So just because you, John, aren't aware of something doesn't mean that things aren't happening. We have all through the effort reviewed what needed to be done. We've worked on the legislative front, and in fact the legislative front, now that we're talking about it openly, is something that was drafted by our attorney, and that is pretty well the form in which that it's going forward in the legislative area. But it's important that we understand that there's 3 different prongs to this, and we cannot move forward with the DOA unless the DOA is ready. And at this point, they're not ready to hear the arguments, so we're prepared, but we must work through the statutory requirements. And when they approve the time frame for the public hearing, we will be ready. There's nothing for us to do until then, other than to sit tight with the documents that we have prepared.
John, the next question is, what is the purpose for the City of Waukesha's water utility owning a 2.0 acre tax exempt parcel located on the east side of Big Bend Road between Merlin Lane and Turner's Pike East, just south of Mill Creek, outside of the new water service area?
Well, if you're referring to the Lathers property land, the purpose of that was to drill shallow aquifers, and that was going to be the city's solution so that they could blend that water with the radium water, tainted water that they currently have in order to meet the EPA guidelines for contamination that they currently have to meet in 2018. That's one of the primary reasons for us to support their application to get a Great Lakes diversion, is so that they don't drill wells and utilize those wells. What we would rather have them do is have a consistent, long-term, sustainable water source, and the only place that you're going to get that is Lake Michigan. We should be supporting them in their efforts to get that water. We should be encouraging them and doing everything we can help so that the water that remains in the aquifer that the town of Waukesha residents and businesses use isn't compromised. And instead what we're doing is we're fighting them in every chance that we have and trying to stop them from getting a Great Lakes diversion. We're not helping with that at all. We've delayed them and delayed them and delayed them. What we should be doing is encouraging them, and that way that wells at the Lathers property aren't going to be used.
Thank you. Angie?
The question had nothing to do with Lathers. Could you read it again, please?
It doesn't have a name on the parcel. It says, what is the purpose for the City of Waukesha water utility owning a 2 acre tax exempt parcel since 2000 on the east side of Big Bend Road between Merlin Lane and Turner's Pike East, just south of the Mill Creek and outside of the new water service area? It does not have a name of the property owner.
That's not the Lathers property, that's completely on the other side of town. I believe that particular parcel was purchased, the water utility has purchased a number of parcels within the town of Waukesha. The map is there, the large one. In the event that they are unsuccessful with their Lake Michigan diversion, they plan to come and take our shallow aquifer water. Everything that the town board has done is to protect our shallow aquifer water. And for anyone to suggest that all of our actions are not in that keeping is simply mistaken. The reason that the smaller water service area is in place is because it enhances the city of Waukesha's application. The compact does not allow for expansion. And it is very clear in the review that we've gotten that in the event that the entire area is included, not only is it unnecessary, but it will keep the city of Waukesha from being successful. We need them to be successful. We have no demonstrated need, and it shows expansion. Both of those are non-starters when it comes to compact approval.
Thank you. John, 1 minute rebuttal.
A smaller water service area does not help in the application process whatsoever. As a matter of fact, General Manager of the Water Utility, Dan Dukniak, was asked that question specifically. Would a smaller water service area help the application along? And his direct, simple comment was, no, it doesn't help.
Thank you, John. Angie, a 1 minute rebuttal.
I guess I'd prefer to use a resource for decision-making for the town of Waukesha that isn't a paid person from the city of Waukesha Water Utility. These are the same group of people and the same gentleman that stood before us 2 years ago and said, just sign this quick document, it doesn't mean much, it's going to be free, it won't cost you anything, you know, just let us know that you're going to be okay with the water service area. Their land use map, which is the colorful one on the side there in yellow, that's the city of Waukesha land use plan. You'll notice that their water service area matches the land use plan in the initial stage. That's because they plan to continue to expand into the town of Waukesha if they have the opportunity. They're going to not say that publicly, but that's been their plan all along. That's why they're unhappy. That's why we are here tonight, quite frankly. It's all about the water.
Thank you. The next question is for Angie. The question is there such a thing as forced annexation, where a town can forcibly take away land from its neighbor without the consent of the town losing the land?
I think this particular question probably comes because there's been misstatements in the paper by Mr. Marek. He refers many times to the 288 acres as an annexation. That is not an annexation, that is an incorporation. It's a completely different set of statutes and rules. And there are provisions in statute to allow municipalities to take some action. It typically doesn't happen for annexation and for incorporation when you're crossing municipal boundaries. In this case, people can be forced to annex if they are among a group of people who wish to do so. Annexations are typically by developers who want to take a piece of property into another community in order to have improved density when you're selling property off. But if there's a group of property owners that wish to go in, if they take 51% of their neighbors, they can, quote, be forced in that situation. But that's quite an unusual situation to happen. In most cases, someone chooses. But one municipality annexing another municipality is a misnomer. That simply can't happen. It would be by incorporation, not by annexation.
Thank you. John?
Well, we agree. There is no such thing as forced annexation unless, of course, it is within a group of properties. If we were in the water service area and you needed water because your well was contaminated, or your septic, like our own town hall here, failed, and you had no secondary suitable source site for a septic system, or your well was contaminated beyond the level of arsenic or molybdenum or manganese, all of which we have in our aquifer right now, in excess of EPA limitations in some areas. At that point, you still can't be forced to annex. The city has put in writing that they are not going to force you to annex if you have the need of water and or sewer service It's just, there is no such thing as forced annexation.
Thank you, John. Angie, 1 minute rebuttal.
John, please show us the document that the city has provided you that gives us a free pass for connecting to water and sewer in the town of Waukesha to the city. Many acres of land have been lost from our community because there is no such document. Every single request is a by the need piece of paper that goes through the Common Council. We've negotiated with the city for over a year. It certainly would have been some control that we would like to have had. In certain circumstances, when the DNR is involved and negotiations have taken place, depending upon the temperament of the Common Council and the mayor, yes, certain people have gotten water and or sewer, but in very rare circumstances. It's certainly not something that happens every day. And if one of us needed water and we were close, we would be asked to be annexed in order to obtain that. And even in some cases when someone is annexed, they don't have a right to have water and sewer.
John?
Well, I'm scurrying and searching for the letter. It dates back to 1987, and the fact is that there is no provision for forced annexation, and there is no rule with the city of Waukesha that's going to make us be annexed into the city if we require water or sanitary services. It's just that simple. There have only been 11 annexations since 2007, and that I have that document here. It's sitting right here, and those annexations were virtually all from developers, and none of them were due to somebody needing water.
Thank you. John, the next question is posed to you. In the event a town resident's well fails, what are the provisions that the town has to rectify that situation? And what is your opinion on multiple wells in an area?
Well, if by a well failing, you're talking about having that well be in excess of the allowable limits for a contaminant, whether that be molybdenum, arsenic, or perhaps some of the runoff from the many farms that we have here, fertilizers and pesticides, or perhaps from any of the tanker trucks or trains that traverse the town, or any of the 7 gas stations that surround the town with many tens of thousands of gasoline sitting in them, or perhaps from Chase Fuel that has 60,000 gallons worth of containers sitting on town property. There's all kinds of contamination that could occur to our wells. And right now, our choices, if we have contamination as it stands today and we're outside the water service area, bottled water is your choice. I don't think that bottled water, holding tanks, and composting toilets are part of the American dream.
Angie?
I hear you, John, say that some of us on the town board have represented that we think that our constituents should use bottled water and composting toilets, and perhaps if they have other property up north they'd like to do that with, I would agree with you, but we've never uttered those words here in the town of Waukesha. It's disrespectful of you to make such a representation of us. There are issues related to water, none of which have been documented in the town of Waukesha general well supply like you're representing. You're scaring people, you're using fear-mongering. It is important not to do such things. It is simply untrue. We have very specific information and documentation with where there are issues, and that's at the fly ash site up in the northwest corner of our community. That's well documented. Some of those folks do have water from the city for that very reason. But all of us in the state and around the country, we're not all on a municipal water supply. You seem to think if we don't join up with the city of Waukesha, we simply will be high and dry and there won't be any options available to us. Well, that doesn't stop at our borders. What about into New Berlin, which is also on the shallow water aquifer, and all of the town of Brookfield? None of those folks are in a secondary water supply area, but nobody's running around trying to do a safety net for them. Why? Because no one is going to be developing property in those communities. They're only looking to put a safety net in the town of Waukesha because that opens up the town of Waukesha to further annexation. If we're out of the water service area, annexation stops. They can no longer supply water and sewer to those more densely populated areas, and the land will be developed in the town of Waukesha, supporting our tax base.
Thank you. Angie, the next question. If the town of Waukesha approves the Great Lakes water application, is there any evidence to suggest town residents would assume financial responsibility? And does blocking the application process benefit town residents?
I feel very strongly that we should support the City of Waukesha application for Lake Michigan diversion. It's very important that they receive it because their Plan B is on the map, and that's a devastating effect on our waterways and shallow water aquifer. The reduced service area will enhance their application, and it's important that we maintain it. If we don't support them, we leave ourselves open. It would be ridiculous for us not to support them. And John's assertions that we've delayed their process is patently untrue. We have been in contact with the DNR the entire time and have been assured that we are in no way limiting their ability to move forward. And anyone can talk to the DNR and make that assessment themselves. It's important for us. We've supported the application. Everything we've done has been in support of that application. And it's important for us to move on given those circumstances.
Thank you. John?
Well, I would disagree, and the City of Waukesha and the DNR have been in the paper many, many times talking about the delays that have been caused by the town of Waukesha. With regards to the amount of poisoning and contamination that's in our aquifer currently, I have all of the test results here for anybody that would like to see them. We have molybdenum, arsenic, and manganese and iron contamination in excess of the allowable EPA limits at the Lathers property, which is certainly not man-caused fly ash dump. In addition to that, I don't live in the city of New Berlin. I'm not drinking their water. I don't own property. I own property there, but they'll take care of their own problems. We have our own problems here. The town of Brookfield is on a completely different aquifer than we are on here. That's all.
Thank you. Angie, 1 minute rebuttal.
The DNR has never been in the paper saying that the town of Waukesha has made any kind of delay. Certainly the propaganda machine that is sometimes referred to as the Waukesha Water Utility, they in fact engage a public relations firm at the tune of almost $10,000 a month. And so yes, they are definitely making statements in the news and getting in newsprint, and anything they can do to enhance their own position versus ours, they're going to do. Again, we're not going to rely on the City of Waukesha water utility representations. We will rely on the DNR, which is exactly what we've done. We have not created any delays. We do not have that kind of level of contamination in any of our wells, or we would have been approved as part of a need process. I've checked with the DNR again. Because of your assertions, Mr. Marek, you're simply scaring people. It's untrue. I ask you to stop.
Thank you. John, the next question is